They laughed at her flower tattoo during morning inspection. The commanding officer's eyes narrowed with disgust. When he reached to rip off her sleeve for dress code violation, the colonel's voice thundered across the room. Everyone froze as he walked toward her, face solemn, then saluted the young recruit. The entire room fell silent as 157 soldiers witnessed something they never expected. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sofia Chen stood in the back row during morning inspection at Fort Horizon Military Base, trying to blend in with the other new recruits. At 24, she was smaller than most, with a quiet demeanor that made her easy to overlook. She wore the standard olive green uniform, but unlike the others, she had rolled her right sleeve up slightly higher than regulation permitted. This wasn't an act of rebellion but necessity. The bandage underneath needed air to heal properly. Sergeant Miller, notorious for his strict adherence to protocol, moved methodically down the line. His eyes scanned each recruit with mechanical precision until he reached Sofia. His gaze immediately locked onto her exposed forearm, where the edge of a colorful tattoo peeked out from beneath her partially rolled sleeve. "Recruit Chen," he barked, his voice echoing through the barracks. "What is that on your arm?" The room tensed. Everyone knew that visible tattoos during inspection were strictly against regulations. Sofia didn't flinch, her expression remaining calm as she replied, "A tattoo, Sergeant." "A tattoo," he repeated, mockery dripping from his voice. "And you think the United States Army cares about your little flower drawing? Roll down that sleeve immediately." Sofia hesitated. "With respect, Sergeant," the medical officer advised. "Did I ask for medical advice, recruit?" "Roll it down." Each word landed like a hammer. Before Sofia could respond, a voice called out from behind them, "Let me see it." The entire room shifted attention to Colonel James Harrison, the base commander, who had entered silently during inspection. In his late 50s with steel-gray hair and posture that commanded respect without effort, Colonel Harrison was rarely seen during routine inspections. "Sir, I was just enforcing uniform code," Sergeant Miller explained, standing at attention. "I didn't ask what you were doing, Sergeant." The colonel's voice was quiet but carried weight that silenced the room. "I said let me see it." He approached Sofia, who maintained perfect posture despite the tension building around her. The colonel gestured toward her arm. "Show me, recruit." Sofia carefully rolled her sleeve higher, revealing a tattoo of a lotus flower with intricate detailing. The flower appeared to be emerging from murky waters, its petals open toward the sky. Small Chinese characters curved around the bottom of the stem. The colonel studied it for several seconds, his expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's shock, he straightened and saluted her. "At ease, everyone," he said to the stunned room. "Sergeant Miller, continue inspection." "Recruit Chen, my office in 20 minutes." As Colonel Harrison left, whispers immediately broke out among the recruits. Sofia rolled her sleeve back down, her face betraying no emotion despite becoming the center of attention. "What was that about?" whispered the recruit next to her. Sofia just shook her head slightly. "I don't know." But that wasn't entirely true. The tattoo had significance far beyond what anyone at Fort Horizon could imagine. It wasn't just decorative art. It was a symbol of something that connected her to a world few people knew existed. 20 minutes later, Sofia stood outside Colonel Harrison's office, knocked precisely 3 times, and entered when commanded. The office was spartanly decorated, a few medals and photographs, maps of various regions, and a desk meticulously organized. "Recruit Chen," the colonel said, not looking up from his paperwork. "Or should I say Specialist Chen?" Sofia remained silent, standing at attention. "At ease," he said, finally looking up. "How long were you planning to keep up this charade?" "Sir, I'm not sure what you mean," Sofia replied. her voice level and controlled. Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair. The Lotus Division doesn't typically send its operatives to basic training unless there's something very specific they're looking for. He tapped his desk. That tattoo isn't just a pretty flower, is it? Sofia's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. How do you know about the Lotus Division? The colonel opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small metal coin, sliding it across to her. On it was the same Lotus design as her tattoo. Because I worked with your division during Operation Silent Echo, 2018, Afghanistan. I never saw your faces, but I know your symbols. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sofia picked up the coin, examining it carefully. Then you know why I'm here. I have suspicions, he replied, but I'd rather hear it from you. I'm here to observe and evaluate, Sofia said, placing the coin back on his desk. Nothing more. Evaluate what exactly? Not what, sir, who? The colonel's eyes narrowed. We have a leak. It wasn't a question, but Sofia nodded once. Intelligence suggests sensitive information about troop movements and training protocols has been compromised from this base. My assignment is to identify the source. Colonel Harrison leaned forward. And basic training was your cover? The most efficient way to observe all personnel without raising suspicion. New recruits are watched but not feared. Until someone notices your tattoo, the colonel pointed out. Sofia's lips tightened slightly. An unavoidable risk. The bandage caused more questions than the tattoo would have. I calculated that most would see it as a simple dress code violation. What I don't understand, Colonel Harrison said, is why the Lotus Division is involved. This should be a matter for military intelligence or CID. The information being leaked concerns more than just this base, sir. It involves 5 separate operations across 3 continents. The Lotus Division specializes in pattern recognition and covert infiltration. The colonel nodded slowly. I see. And now that I know who you are, my mission parameters allow for one senior officer to be aware of my presence. It simplifies certain logistics. Sofia's voice remained professional, but there was a hint of relief. Your history with the division makes you the logical choice. Glad to be of service, the colonel said dryly. What do you need from me? Nothing, sir. Just continue as normal. Any special treatment would compromise my cover, including the mockery about your tattoo. A ghost of a smile crossed Sofia's face. Especially that, sir. It establishes me as someone who doesn't quite fit in. A psychological positioning that makes people less guarded around me. Colonel Harrison studied her for a moment. How many operations have you completed, Specialist Chen? 17. Sir, his eyebrows raised slightly. Impressive for someone your age. The Lotus Division must have recruited you young. Necessity creates opportunities, sir. Her answer was practiced, revealing nothing. Very well, maintain your cover. Report to me only if absolutely necessary. He stood up. Dismissed, Recruit Chen. Sofia saluted and turned to leave. One more thing, the colonel called after her. That tattoo, what do the characters mean? Sofia paused at the door. From the darkest depths comes the most beautiful light, she translated. Then she was gone, returning to her role as just another struggling recruit. Back in the barracks, rumors had already spread like wildfire. Some said she must be the colonel's illegitimate daughter. Others speculated she had saved his life in another unit. The most popular theory was that she was some kind of celebrity who had joined the military for publicity. Hey, tattoo girl, called out Recruit Jackson, a broad-shouldered man with a perpetual smirk. What's the deal with you and the colonel? You two got history? Sofia was organizing her footlocker, her movements precise and economical. No history, she replied without looking up. Just a misunderstanding about medical regulations. Sure it was, Jackson laughed. That's why. He saluted you, right? Because of medical regulations? Leave her alone, said Recruit Rivera, a serious woman with sharp eyes. It's none of our business. Come on, we're all curious, persisted another recruit named Dawson. What's with the flower anyway? Doesn't seem very tough for someone joining. The Army. Sofia closed her footlocker and sat on her bunk. It's a lotus, she said simply. It grows in mud but stays clean. It's a reminder. A reminder of what? Dawson pressed. Sofia looked at him directly, her gaze suddenly intense enough that he took a small step back. That appearances can be deceiving. The conversation ended there as Sergeant Miller entered the barracks for evening inspection. But the seeds of curiosity had been planted. Who was this quiet recruit with the mysterious tattoo that commanded the respect of a colonel? Over the next few weeks, Sofia maintained her role perfectly. She performed well in physical training, but never exceptionally enough to stand out. She scored above average on written tests, but made deliberate mistakes to avoid perfect scores. She was helpful to struggling recruits, but never took leadership positions unless directly ordered. In every way, she crafted the image of a competent but unremarkable soldier, exactly the kind of person others would speak freely around without concern, and speak they did. Sofia became a sounding board for frustrations, secrets, and gossip. Her bunkmates confided in her about relationships, aspirations, and fears. Officers discussed scheduling and logistics in her presence as if she were invisible. Even Sergeant Miller eventually softened, explaining training protocols to her when she asked insightful questions. All the while, Sofia listened and observed, building a mental map of information flows throughout the base. She noted which instructors spent time together off duty, which administrative staff had access to sensitive computers, which recruits had backgrounds that didn't quite add up. Her moment of opportunity came during week 6 of training, when recruits were granted their first weekend pass. While most headed into town for much-needed recreation, Sofia claimed illness and remained behind. With the barracks nearly empty, she methodically searched each footlocker and personal space, leaving everything exactly as she found it. The search yielded nothing conclusive, but she hadn't expected it to. Professionals rarely kept evidence in obvious places. What she needed was to observe behavior patterns, particularly around the times when leaked information coincided with base activities. On Sunday evening, as recruits returned from their passes, Sofia noticed something unusual. Staff Sergeant Walsh, who oversaw communications training, arrived back on base in civilian clothes carrying a gym bag. Nothing remarkable except that he had not signed out for a weekend pass. More importantly, his route took him past the administrative building rather than directly to the staff quarters. Sofia followed at a distance, using the skills that had made her valuable to the Lotus Division. Her movement was silent, her presence almost imperceptible as she blended with shadows and used other returning personnel as visual cover. Sergeant Walsh entered the administrative building using his access card, unusual for a Sunday evening when most offices were closed. Sofia waited 3 minutes, then approached the side entrance. The card reader required credentials she didn't have. But she wasn't without resources. From her pocket, she removed what appeared to be a standard military ID. When pressed against the reader, however, it emitted a brief electromagnetic pulse that temporarily disrupted the security system. The door unlocked with a soft click. Inside, Sofia moved silently through darkened hallways, orienting herself based on the building schematic she had memorized during her first week. She heard Sergeant Walsh's voice coming from an office at the end of the corridor. He was speaking to someone. Walsh was saying this was the 3rd time they had changed the drop protocol, his voice tense. He couldn't keep adjusting without raising suspicion. A female voice responded, too quiet for Sofia to make out the words. She inched closer, positioning herself beside the partially open door. Walsh continued, "That fine, but this was the last time. The information was valuable, but not worth his career." Sofia carefully withdrew her phone, modified with Lotus Division technology, and began recording the conversation. She needed evidence, not just suspicion. Walsh explained they wanted the training schedules for next month, especially the joint exercises with NATO forces. That's what they were paying for now. He would upload it to the server tomorrow during the communications drill. Sofia had heard enough. She silently retreated the way she came, ensuring the security system reactivated behind her. By the time she returned to the barracks, she had already encrypted and transmitted the recording to her handler, using a burst transmission that lasted less than half a second. The next morning, Sofia noticed Colonel Harrison watching the recruits during physical training. His expression gave nothing away, but she knew her message had been received. Now came the delicate part, coordinating the response without revealing her involvement. During breakfast, an announcement came over the PA system, stating that all communications training personnel should report to Conference Room B immediately, and all communications training for recruits was suspended until further notice. Whispers spread through the mess hall as recruits speculated about the unusual announcement. Sofia ate quietly, watching as Staff Sergeant Walsh put down his coffee cup with slightly trembling hands before leaving the hall. 2 hours later, military police entered the training area and escorted Sergeant Walsh away. No explanation was given to the recruits, but Sofia noticed Colonel Harrison observing from a distance, his face grim but satisfied. That evening, as Sofia returned from shower facilities, she found a note in her footlocker stating 0500, firing range, solo qualification. It wasn't part of the regular training schedule, and the handwriting matched Colonel Harrison's signature. Style. The next morning, Sofia arrived at the firing range before dawn. Colonel Harrison was already there, along with a woman in civilian clothes whom Sofia immediately recognized as Director Mei Lin, her supervisor from the Lotus Division. Director Lin said without preamble that it was good work. Walsh was working with a network of contractors selling information to 3 separate bidders, including one hostile state actor. Sofia nodded, accepting the praise with the same quiet demeanor she showed to everything. Colonel Harrison added that her cover remained intact. As far as anyone knew, Walsh was caught during a routine security audit. Sofia asked what happened. Now, Director Lin handed her a folder, explaining these were new orders. There was evidence suggesting Walsh wasn't working alone. At least one accomplice remained active on this base. Sofia opened the folder, scanning the contents quickly, realizing they wanted her to continue the operation. Director Lin confirmed this, but with a modification. Colonel Harrison had suggested a more visible approach might be beneficial. Sofia looked at the colonel questioningly. He explained that the mysterious recruit routine had served its purpose. Now they needed someone who could access different circles, officer training, advanced tactical sessions, places where Walsh didn't have clearance. Sofia realized they were promoting her. Colonel Harrison nodded, explaining it was effective immediately for exceptional performance during training exercises and demonstrating leadership potential. She would be transferred to Officer Candidate School there on base. Sofia pointed out that her tattoo would still be an issue. Director Lin said with the hint of a smile that not anymore. In fact, it was going to become her signature. Sofia said she didn't understand. Colonel Harrison explained that tomorrow at the graduation ceremony for her training cohort, he would be publicly recognizing several recruits for outstanding achievement. She would be among them. During the ceremony, he would make a point of acknowledging her tattoo, not as a violation, but as a symbol of the Special Joint Forces initiative she participated in before joining. Sofia asked if that wouldn't raise questions about her background. Director Lin said precisely Questions that would be answered with a carefully crafted cover story about her involvement in a humanitarian mission in Southeast Asia, where she earned that tattoo as recognition from locals she helped protect. It explained her unusual skills, without revealing her true affiliation. Sofia considered this change in strategy, noting it was risky. More visibility meant more scrutiny. Colonel Harrison said that sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight. Her accomplishments would become so well known that no one would think to question them. The next day, standing before the assembled company of 157 soldiers, Colonel Harrison called Sofia forward. The morning sun glinted off his medals as he addressed the formation. He announced that recruit Chen had demonstrated exceptional aptitude during training. What many of them didn't know was that before joining their ranks officially, recruit Chen served in a special capacity during Operation White Lotus, a joint humanitarian mission in the Mekong Delta. Murmurs spread through the ranks as Sofia stood at attention, her expression neutral despite the fabricated story being woven around her. The colonel continued that the tattoo some of them had noticed was bestowed upon her by local villagers after she helped evacuate a hospital during severe flooding, saving 37 lives. In their culture, the lotus represents resilience and purity rising from muddy waters, qualities that recruit Chen had demonstrated throughout her training there. He turned to face Sofia directly, announcing it was therefore his pleasure to announce her immediate promotion to specialist and transfer to officer candidate school, where her unique perspective and skills would be of great value to their armed forces. The colonel saluted her formally, and this time, when Sofia returned the salute, there was nothing hidden about the gesture. The entire company witnessed the exchange, their perception of the quiet recruit with the tattoo transforming. In an instant, as Sofia lowered her hand from the salute, she caught the eye of Sergeant Miller, whose earlier mockery had now been replaced with a look of bewilderment and reassessment. Nearby, recruits Jackson and Dawson stared with newfound respect, while recruit Rivera gave her a small knowing nod. None of them understood the full truth, of course. The lotus tattoo wasn't given to her by grateful villagers. It was the mark of the Lotus Division, an elite unit that operated in the shadows of global intelligence. The Chinese characters didn't speak of beauty from darkness, but rather contained a coded reference to her operational. Yet as Sofia stood there, receiving recognition for a mission she never performed, she reflected on the irony. Her actual accomplishments, the 17 completed operations, the lives saved through information she had gathered, the threats neutralized before they materialized, would never be acknowledged publicly. Instead, she was being celebrated for a fiction crafted to hide a deeper truth. But that was the nature of her work. The lotus grows in mud, yet remains clean. It operates in two worlds simultaneously, rooted in darkness while blooming in light. Just as Sofia Chen, specialist of the Lotus Division, would continue her mission at Fort Horizon, now hiding her purpose behind a different kind of visibility. As the ceremony concluded and the company dispersed, Colonel Harrison approached her once more. "Comfortable with your new cover, Specialist Chen?" Sofia's lips curved in a slight smile. "From shadow to spotlight, just another form of camouflage, sir." "Indeed," he replied. "Sometimes the most effective way to hide something valuable is to put it on display, surrounded by a story so compelling that no one thinks to look deeper." Sofia glanced down at her tattoo, now a recognized badge of honor rather than a regulation violation. "The lotus adapts to whatever waters it finds itself in," she said quietly. "As do I." Officer candidate school was a different world compared to basic training. Sofia found herself surrounded by ambitious, sharp-minded individuals competing for leadership positions. Unlike the random assortment of backgrounds in basic training, her OCS classmates were carefully selected for their potential college graduates, prior service members with distinguished records, and exceptional performers. From the enlisted ranks, Sofia's carefully crafted reputation preceded her. On her first day, she caught candidates whispering as she entered the classroom, their eyes drawn to her right forearm, where the lotus tattoo was now visible beneath her rolled sleeve, a privilege granted by her new special recognition status. "Is it true you carried a child through floodwaters for 3 miles?" asked candidate Reyes during their first lunch break. Sofia smiled slightly. "Stories tend to grow with each telling," she replied, neither confirming nor denying the fabricated heroics that had somehow expanded since the colonel's announcement. "But you were there, right? Operation White Lotus?" pressed another candidate named Torres. "I served where I was needed," Sofia answered, maintaining the deliberate ambiguity that made her cover story effective. The less specific her answers, the more people filled in the gaps with their own assumptions. What none of them knew was that Sofia's transfer to OCS wasn't just about maintaining her cover. It was strategically necessary for her mission. The evidence trail from Staff Sergeant Walsh suggested his accomplice had access to information that flowed through officer channels. Someone with rank, or at least positioned close to those with rank, was the missing piece in the intelligence leak. In the 3rd week of training, Sofia got her first promising lead. Major Winters, the tactics instructor, kept her behind after a training exercise on secure communications protocols. "Specialist Chen," he said once the other candidates had left, "your analysis of the vulnerability in the relay system was insightful. Where did you learn to think that way?" Sofia had deliberately pointed out a flaw that shouldn't have been obvious to someone with her background. It was a calculated risk, drawing attention to her knowledge while testing who might react to it. "I had a communications rotation during my previous assignment, sir," she replied, referencing her fictional past. Major Winters studied her with narrowed eyes. "You know, I reviewed your file after that comment in class. There's remarkably little detail about Operation White Lotus for something the colonel made such a point of recognizing." "Operational security, sir," Sofia said, maintaining eye contact. "Much of it remains classified." "Of course," he nodded. But his expression suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied. "Tell me, Chen, have you considered a specialization in signals intelligence after commissioning? Someone with your perspective could be valuable in that field." The emphasis on perspective caught Sofia's attention. It could be innocent, or it could be a subtle probe from someone concerned about her knowledge. "I'm keeping my options open, sir," she replied neutrally. "Well, if you're interested, I supervise some special projects in that area. Stop by my office sometime, unofficially, of course." The invitation hung in the air, neither clearly innocent nor overtly suspicious. Exactly the kind of ambiguous opening that could be either a legitimate mentorship offer or something more concerning. "Thank you, sir. I'll consider it." That evening, Sofia crafted a carefully worded update for Colonel Harrison, encoding it within a routine request for additional uniform allowance. The colonel's response came the next morning, equally coded within an approval form. "Proceed with caution. Major Winters supervises communications for joint exercises, matching the profile of leaked information." For the next 2 weeks, Sofia maintained her cover as a promising officer candidate, while gradually building rapport with Major Winters. She asked thoughtful questions after class, referenced obscure communications protocols that hinted at deeper knowledge, and generally presented herself as someone who might be sympathetic to perspectives outside standard military doctrine. The Major responded by sharing increasingly specific information about communication systems, some of it verging on sensitive. He began inviting her to informal study sessions with a small group of candidates he was mentoring. Sofia noted that these candidates all had technical backgrounds or prior access to classified systems. During one such session, Major Winters made an offhand comment that triggered Sofia's internal alarms. "The military system is rigid," he remarked while reviewing tactical deployments, "but there are always backdoors for those who understand." The true architecture. His eyes met Sofia's briefly, a look that carried weight beyond the casual statement. Sofia responded with a slight nod, as if acknowledging a deeper meaning. Later that night, alone in her quarters, Sofia reviewed the pattern of information Major Winters had revealed during these sessions. Individually, none of it crossed the line into classified disclosure. But collectively, it painted a concerning picture, someone systematically highlighting vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Sofia needed more. Suspicion wasn't proof, and the Lotus Division required absolute certainty before action. She decided to accelerate her approach. The opportunity came during the following week's tactical exercise. Candidates were divided into teams to secure various objectives across the training grounds. Sofia was assigned to Major Winters' team, tasked with defending a communications relay against a simulated enemy force. As the exercise progressed, Sofia deliberately positioned herself near the Major as he coordinated the defense. When the enemy launched their main assault, amid the confusion of blank rounds and smoke grenades, Sofia quietly accessed the relay terminal and inserted a custom drive disguised as standard equipment. The drive contained no malware. The Lotus Division wasn't authorized for offensive cyber operations on domestic systems. Instead, it was a sophisticated monitoring tool that would record access patterns and data transfers without disrupting normal operations. Sofia completed the installation in under 30 seconds, then resumed her defensive position just as Major Winters turned to give new orders. If he noticed her brief absence, he gave no indication. 3 days later, the drive had collected enough data to confirm Sofia's suspicions. Major Winters had accessed the training network during unusual hours, extracting files about upcoming joint exercises, exactly the type of information Staff Sergeant Walsh had been caught selling. But there was a complication. The data also showed another user accessing similar files, Captain Lydia Harris, the administrative officer who oversaw personnel records for OCS candidates. This presented a new dimension to the investigation, either another accomplice or potentially the true source of the leaks. Sofia needed to report this development to Colonel Harrison, but her usual communication methods were too slow for this critical information. She would need to meet with him directly, which meant creating a plausible reason to visit his office. The next morning, Sofia approached her direct supervisor, Lieutenant Rodriguez. "Sir, I need to request a meeting with Colonel Harrison regarding my specialized training path," she stated formally. Lieutenant Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual, Chen. The colonel doesn't typically handle individual training requests." "It relates to my previous assignment, sir." The colonel specifically asked to be informed of any specialized requirements. Rodriguez seemed skeptical but nodded. "I'll submit the request." "Don't expect anything soon. The colonel's schedule is packed with the upcoming joint exercise coordination." But to Sofia's surprise, approval came back within hours. The colonel would see her that afternoon during the administrative block. It suggested Harrison was already aware that something significant had developed. At precisely 1500 hours, Sofia knocked on the colonel's office door. "Enter," came the response. Inside, she found not only Colonel Harrison but also Director Lin, out of uniform in civilian business attire. The presence of her Lotus Division supervisor confirmed the seriousness of the situation. "Report, Specialist Chen," Director Lin said without preamble once the door was secured. Sofia provided a concise summary of her findings, highlighting the unexpected complication of Captain Harris's involvement. She concluded with her assessment. "Major Winters fits the profile for our second leak source, but Captain Harris's access pattern suggests either collaboration or a separate operation." "Entirely." Colonel Harrison frowned. "Captain Harris has been with this base for 7 years. Exemplary record, multiple commendations. Sometimes the best cover is a perfect record," Director Lin observed. "What's your recommendation, Specialist?" Sofia didn't hesitate. We need to determine if they're working together or independently. I suggest a controlled information leak, different details to each suspect, track which version appears in the wild. Risky, Colonel Harrison said. If they are collaborating, they'll compare notes and realize they're being tested. Not if the information appears to come from different sources, Sofia countered. Major Winters receives tactical details through the exercise planning session. Captain Harris receives personnel deployment information through administrative channels. The information only makes sense when combined, which would force them to reveal any collaboration. Director Lin nodded approvingly. Clean approach. Minimal resources, maximum intelligence yield. Colonel Harrison considered for a moment, then agreed. I'll arrange it. The joint exercise planning session is tomorrow. We'll plant the modified information then. One more thing, Sofia added. I need to ensure my monitoring tool remains in place. Major Winters has been inviting me to specialized training sessions that often involve communications equipment. I believe he's testing my receptiveness to recruitment. You think he's trying to turn you? Colonel Harrison asked sharply. He's looking for someone with technical knowledge who might be sympathetic to whatever justification he uses for selling information. My carefully crafted background makes me an ideal candidate from his perspective. Director Lin's expression hardened. That creates an opportunity, but also increases your exposure. If he becomes suspicious, he may dig deeper into your cover. I'm aware of the risk, Sofia acknowledged. But it also positions me to gather definitive evidence. After a moment of consideration, Director Lin nodded. Proceed, but with extreme caution. We need proof that will stand up in a military tribunal. The meeting concluded with detailed planning for the controlled leak operation. As Sofia prepared to leave, Colonel Harrison called her back. Specialist Chen, your tattoo has become quite the topic of conversation among the officer candidates. Sofia nodded. As intended, sir. It's an effective distraction, indeed. But now I'm curious, beyond the operational codes hidden in the design, what does the lotus mean to you personally? The question caught Sofia off guard. In the Lotus division, personal meaning was rarely discussed. The focus remained on operational efficiency and mission success. After a moment, she answered honestly, it reminds me that beauty and strength can emerge from the darkest places. That purity of purpose matters more than purity of environment. The colonel nodded thoughtfully. A philosophy well suited to your line of work. Carry on, specialist. The next day, Operation Mirror Image, as the controlled leak was designated, went into effect. During the joint exercise planning session, Colonel Harrison personally presented modified information about tactical positioning to a group that included Major Winters. Simultaneously, through administrative channels, Captain Harris received altered personnel deployment schedules. Sofia returned to her routine as an officer candidate, but with heightened awareness of both suspects. She noted that Major Winters seemed particularly interested in the new tactical information, asking several clarifying questions that focused on exactly the modified details. 2 days later, Sofia was approached by Captain Harris after the morning physical training session. Specialist Chen, a moment of your time, the captain said, gesturing toward a quiet corner of the training field. Sofia followed, maintaining a respectful but relaxed demeanor. Yes, ma'am? I've been reviewing your file. Captain Harris began, her voice low. Your background is interesting. Not many candidates come to OCS with special recognition from a colonel. I was fortunate to serve in a meaningful capacity, ma'am. Captain Harris studied her face carefully. The thing is, when I tried to access the full operational report for White Lotus, I found unusual restrictions. Very few people have clearance to see those files. Sofia felt a subtle shift in the conversation. This wasn't routine administrative curiosity. Captain Harris was probing for information in a way that mirrored Major Winter's approach. Operational security, ma'am. I'm not privy to the classification decisions. Of course, Captain Harris smiled slightly. I'm simply trying to ensure your record is properly documented for your future assignments. Speaking of which, have you considered where you might like to be posted after commissioning? I go where I'm needed, ma'am. Admirable, the captain nodded, though between us, some postings offer more opportunities than others. I have some influence in the assignment process. Perhaps we could discuss your options sometime, unofficially. The parallel to Major Winter's approach was striking. Captain Harris was similarly testing Sofia's receptiveness to operating outside standard channels. I'd appreciate any guidance, ma'am, Sofia replied, maintaining her cover as an ambitious but somewhat naive officer candidate. That evening, Sofia updated Colonel Harrison through their secure channel. Both suspects had shown interest in the planted information, and both had made overtures suggesting unofficial channels of communication. The pattern was consistent with recruitment attempts, but it remained unclear whether they were working together or as competitors. The answer came 3 days later. Sofia's monitoring tool captured Major Winters accessing the communication system at 0200 hours, while outside normal operations. He downloaded both sets of planted information, not just the tactical data he had been directly exposed to, but also the personnel deployments that had only been shared with Captain Harris. This was the evidence they needed. The two suspects were collaborating, sharing their separate pieces of intelligence to create a comprehensive package for their buyers. Sofia immediately alerted Colonel Harrison through emergency protocols, a seemingly innocent message to the administrative office requesting clarification on uniform standards for an upcoming ceremony. The coded language within indicated critical developments requiring immediate action. Within an hour, Sofia received orders to report to an off-base location, a small coffee shop in the nearby town. There, in civilian clothes, she met Director Lin. Your monitoring tool captured the evidence we needed, Director Lin confirmed after they had secured a private corner table. Major Winters and Captain Harris have been working together for at least 18 months, selling information to private military contractors who then resell to various international buyers. What happens now? Sofia asked. Colonel Harrison is coordinating with military intelligence for the arrests. They'll be taken into custody tomorrow morning. Director Lin stirred her untouched coffee. Your part in this operation is nearly complete. Nearly? We need to ensure the network is fully exposed. Our intelligence suggests there may be a third party, someone who serves as the physical connection to external buyers. Neither Winters nor Harris has been observed making direct contact with outside entities. Sofia considered this. The base exchange officer, Lieutenant Commander Phillips. He coordinates with civilian contractors for supplies and has regular reasons to travel off base. Director Lin smiled slightly. Your observational skills remain exceptional. Yes, Phillips is a person of interest, but we lack evidence connecting him to Winters and Harris. I can get that evidence, Sofia said confidently. Major Winters invited me to a strategy session at his quarters tonight, unofficially, with a small group of like-minded candidates. Given the imminent arrests, this could be their last chance to move sensitive information. Director Lin's expression turned serious. That's extremely high risk. If they suspect a trap, you could be in danger. The lotus grows in mud, Sofia quoted softly, yet remains clean. The director studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. Attend the meeting, but with continuous monitoring. We'll have a tactical team on standby nearby. That evening, Sofia arrived at Major Winters' off-base apartment, wearing civilian clothes as instructed. She'd been told to bring nothing that could identify her as military, another red flag that confirmed the illicit nature of the gathering. To her surprise, only 3 people were present: Major Winters, Captain Harris, and Lieutenant Commander Phillips, exactly as she had suspected. There were no other candidates. "Chen, glad you could make it," Major Winters greeted her with unusual warmth. "We've been discussing your potential for some time." Sofia maintained her cover, appearing slightly nervous but eager. "Thank you for including me, sir. I'm honored." "Drop the sir for tonight," he said, handing her a glass of wine. "We're not on base now." Sofia accepted the glass but didn't drink. "I was expecting other candidates." Captain Harris smiled. "This is a more exclusive gathering. We've been watching your performance, your questions, your interest in systems beyond standard protocols. You see things differently than most military minds. We believe you might be open to opportunities that fall outside traditional career paths," Lieutenant Commander Phillips added, studying her carefully. Sofia recognized the moment for what it was, a recruitment attempt for their espionage network. She needed to appear receptive without committing to anything explicitly illegal, maintaining plausible deniability while gathering evidence. "I've always believed that rigid systems need flexible thinking," she offered cautiously. The three exchanged glances, apparently satisfied with her response. "Let me be direct," Major Winters said, lowering his voice despite being in his own apartment. "Military information is valuable to many organizations, private security firms, defense contractors, research institutions. They're willing to pay significant amounts for insights that the military keeps needlessly classified." "It's not treason," Captain Harris added quickly, noting Sofia's carefully crafted expression of concern. "It's simply making information available to qualified professionals who use it to develop better systems, better protection for our troops. And the financial compensation is substantial," Phillips concluded. "Enough to secure your future beyond anything a military pension could provide." Sofia allowed her expression to shift from concern to cautious interest. "How substantial?" Major Winters smiled and opened his laptop. "Let me show you something." He turned the screen toward Sofia, revealing a banking application with an account balance that would take a military officer decades to accumulate legitimately. "This is just from the past 6 months," he explained. "Specialized information. Carries premium value." Sofia feigned impressed surprise while mentally cataloging every detail of what she was being shown: account numbers, transaction dates, the specific banking interface. Her enhanced memory, trained through years with the Lotus Division, would allow her to reproduce this evidence precisely. "What exactly would I need to do?" she asked, appearing tempted but still hesitant. "Nothing that compromises field operations or puts soldiers at risk," Captain Harris assured her. "Primarily exercise plans, communications protocols, deployment schedules, information that has commercial value but doesn't endanger lives." The distinction was a convenient moral fiction they had created to justify their actions. Sofia knew from intelligence reports that the leaked information had already compromised at least 2 covert operations, potentially endangering field agents. "Think of it as consulting," Phillips added. "Sharing your expertise for appropriate compensation." Sofia nodded slowly, as if considering the proposition. "And how would the mechanics work?" "Simple," Major Winters explained. "You access information through your normal duties. Nothing suspicious, nothing that triggers security alerts. You transfer relevant data to secure devices that we provide. Commander Phillips handles the external connections through his civilian contractor meetings. The beauty of our system," Captain Harris added with evident pride, "is its simplicity and separation. No electronic trails connecting us to buyers." "What about tonight?" Sofia asked, glancing around. "Isn't this meeting a risk?" Phillips smiled. "Calculated risk. We only approach candidates with exceptional potential. Your background made you particularly interesting, someone who has already operated outside conventional channels. My background? Sofia allowed genuine confusion to show in her expression. Operation White Lotus, Major Winters said with a knowing smile. The official record is thin, but we have contacts who filled in some details. You weren't just a participant, you were specialized personnel attached to the operation for specific capabilities. Sofia realized they had misinterpreted her cover story in a way that actually reinforced it. They believed she had been part of some unacknowledged special operations component, not far from the truth, but missing the critical detail that she was counterintelligence, not special forces. That tattoo, Phillips nodded toward her forearm. It's not just a souvenir from grateful locals, is it? Some kind of special unit designation, perhaps. Sofia allowed a small, enigmatic smile, neither confirming nor denying. Let them believe what served her purpose. So, Major Winters pressed, "Are you interested in our arrangement?" "I need time to consider," Sofia replied carefully. "This is significant." "Of course," Captain Harris said smoothly. "We understand, but don't take too long. The opportunity we're discussing relates to the upcoming joint exercise. The window for maximum value is narrow." Phillips handed her a small black device that resembled a standard military USB drive. "When you're ready, use this. It's completely secure, untraceable to standard detection methods." Sofia accepted the device, knowing it was the final piece of physical evidence needed to complete the case. "I'll consider it carefully." As she left the apartment, she felt their eyes on her back, evaluating, calculating, wondering if they had just expanded their operation or exposed it to risk. Little did they know that their network had just 12 hours left before complete dismantling. The pre-dawn raid happened with precision that would have impressed even the Lotus Division. At 0430 hours, 3 separate tactical teams simultaneously apprehended Major Winters, Captain Harris, and Lieutenant Commander Phillips. None had time to destroy evidence or activate contingency plans. The operation was executed flawlessly, a testament to Colonel Harrison's careful planning and the intelligence Sofia had provided. By 0600, as most of Fort Horizon was just beginning to stir, Sofia stood in a secure briefing room with Colonel Harrison, Director Lin, and General Martinez, who had flown in specifically for this operation. The evidence spread across the table was damning: financial records, communication devices, and the specialized USB drive Phillips had given Sofia the night before. "Specialist Chun's work has been exemplary," Colonel Harrison was explaining to the general. "Without her infiltration, we might never have uncovered the full extent of this network." General Martinez studied Sofia with new interest. "The Lotus Division continues to impress. Though I must say, you don't fit the profile." "I expected." Sofia maintained her professional demeanor. "The best operatives rarely do, sir." "Indeed," the general gestured to the evidence. "Their operation was sophisticated. 3 separate buyers, compartmentalized information streams, no electronic trail connecting them to the sales. If not for your intervention, this could have continued indefinitely." "There's still the question of how far the network extends," Director Lin pointed out. "The intelligence community is concerned this may be part of a larger operation targeting multiple military installations." Sofia had been considering this possibility as well. The financial transactions suggest a pattern beyond what these 3 could have organized. "The payment structure is too complex, too professional." General Martinez nodded grimly. "Which brings us to your next assignment, Specialist Chun." Sofia glanced at Director Lin, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of confirmation. "Sir?" Sofia prompted. "We need to trace this network to its source," the general explained. "The 3 we've apprehended are significant, but they're not the architects. Someone recruited them, someone provided the technical infrastructure, someone coordinates the buyers." Colonel Harrison picked up the thread. We believe the upcoming joint exercise with NATO forces presents a perfect opportunity. The exercise will bring together personnel from multiple bases, including several where we suspect similar operations may exist. You want me to identify other compromised personnel during the exercise, Sofia concluded. Precisely, Director Lin confirmed. But your role needs to evolve. As an officer candidate who helped expose the spy ring, your cover as an unknown quantity is effectively over. General Martinez leaned forward. Which is why, effective immediately, you're being commissioned as a second lieutenant under special circumstances provisions. Your new cover identity will be as a rising star in military intelligence, which is not far from the truth. Sofia processed this significant change. Becoming an officer wasn't part of her original mission parameters, but the Lotus Division had trained her to adapt to evolving operational requirements. The story we're putting forward, Colonel Harrison explained, is that your background in Operation White Lotus included intelligence gathering components, which helped you recognize the suspicious behavior of Major Winters and his accomplices. You reported your concerns through proper channels, leading to their arrest. We're declassifying a sanitized version of your fictional background, added Director Lin. Enough to explain your rapid advancement without revealing your actual Lotus Division connection. Sofia understood the strategy. My tattoo becomes part of my public identity rather than a secret to be hidden. Exactly, the general nodded approvingly. Sometimes the best place to hide something is in plain sight. No one will look for a covert operative who's being publicly celebrated. The meeting continued with detailed planning for Sofia's new role in the joint exercise investigation. By the time they finished, the sun was fully risen, casting long shadows through the briefing room windows. As the meeting concluded, General Martinez addressed Sofia directly. Lieutenant Chen, I've worked with Lotus Division operatives before, but rarely have I seen this level of adaptability and insight. Your country owes you a debt it can never publicly acknowledge. Sofia accepted the rare compliment with a respectful nod. The work itself is the reward, sir. After the general departed, Colonel Harrison handed Sofia a small box containing the gold bars of a second lieutenant. These are earned, not given, he said firmly. Remember that when others question your rapid promotion. Sofia opened the box, studying the insignia that would transform her identity yet again. Every role we play becomes part of who we are. She reflected, even the ones that begin as cover stories. Director Lin smiled slightly. That's a very Lotus Division philosophy. Speaking of which, she produced a small container of medicinal cream. For your tattoo. The formulation contains a specialized compound that will alter the embedded microdata. Your existing codes would be recognized by anyone familiar with our old classification system. Sofia accepted the container, understanding its significance. Her tattoo wasn't just symbolic. It contained microscopic patterns visible only under specific light conditions, encoding her operational parameters and clearance levels. This update meant her status within the division was evolving as well. The ceremony for your commission is scheduled for 1400 hours today, Colonel Harrison informed her. General Martinez will preside, which is unusual for a second lieutenant. But it reinforces your new cover story. After that, Director Lin added, you'll have 72 hours to prepare for the joint exercise. Use that time to study the personnel files we flagged as potential security concerns. Later that afternoon, Sofia stood at attention as General Martinez pinned the second lieutenant bars to her uniform. The ceremony was deliberately public, held in the base's main courtyard, with representatives from various units in attendance. The general spoke eloquently about initiative, vigilance, and the responsibility of every service member to protect not just the nation's people, but its sensitive information as well. What the audience didn't realize was that every word had been carefully crafted to reinforce Sofia's new cover identity while sending a subtle message to any other compromised personnel who might be watching. We are finding you, one by one. As the general concluded his remarks, he made a point of acknowledging Sofia's tattoo, visible beneath her rolled sleeve as part of her new special recognition status. Lieutenant Chen's lotus reminds us that from the murkiest waters can bloom the most beautiful vigilance. Her unique background and perspective helped her recognize what others missed, protecting vital national security interests. The gathered soldiers and officers applauded politely, but Sofia noticed the varied reactions across the crowd. Most showed simple respect for a ceremony they didn't fully understand. Some displayed curiosity about this unusual field promotion. A few, particularly those from visiting units, exhibited subtle signs of discomfort or heightened attention. Sofia mentally cataloged these reactions, especially from personnel who would be participating in the upcoming joint exercise. Their unease could be innocent, simple surprise at an unexpected promotion, or it could indicate consciousness of guilt, fear that whatever had exposed Winters and his accomplices might expose them too. After the ceremony, Sofia was approached by numerous officers offering congratulations. She accepted each with appropriate gratitude, all while observing, analyzing, cataloging micro-expressions and inconsistencies in their behavior. One interaction particularly caught her attention. Captain Reeves from Fort Westlake, another base participating in the joint exercise, seemed excessively interested in the details of how she had uncovered the espionage ring. Must have taken exceptional observation skills, he commented, studying her with an intensity that struck Sofia as concerning. What first tipped you off about Major Winters? Sofia offered a practiced response, vague enough to be unhelpful while appearing transparent. Multiple small inconsistencies in routine behaviors. Nothing significant in isolation, but the pattern became clear over time. Fascinating, Reeves replied, his eyes briefly flicking to her tattoo. I've always found pattern recognition to be an undervalued skill in military intelligence. As he walked away, Sofia made a mental note to prioritize investigating his connections during the exercise. His interests seemed too pointed, his questions too specific for casual conversation. The next morning, Sofia reported to her new office in the intelligence section, a small but private space befitting her new rank and role. On her desk was a tablet containing the files of 27 individuals flagged as potential security concerns across the 5 bases participating in the joint exercise. For the next 3 days, she immersed herself in these files, memorizing faces, backgrounds, behavioral patterns, and potential vulnerabilities. The Lotus Division had trained her to absorb and process vast amounts of information, a skill that now served her new mission perfectly. She also studied the joint exercise itself, codenamed Unified Response, which would simulate a coordinated military operation across multiple domains: land, air, cyber, and information warfare. The complexity of the exercise created countless opportunities for compromised personnel to access and extract valuable intelligence. On the morning the exercise was set to begin, Sofia attended the senior officer's briefing as the intelligence liaison for Fort Horizon. She was the most junior officer in the room by far, generating curious glances and whispered comments as she took her seat. General Martinez opened the session. Before we begin, I want to address the recent security incident at Fort Horizon. As you've all been informed, 3 personnel have been apprehended for selling classified information to unauthorized parties. Lieutenant Chen was instrumental in uncovering this breach. All eyes turned to Sofia, who maintained her composed, professional demeanor despite the scrutiny. This incident is a stark reminder of our collective responsibility to safeguard sensitive information, the general continued. During this exercise, all standard security protocols will be observed with additional oversight from military intelligence. Lieutenant Chen will be coordinating these enhanced security measures. Sofia noticed Captain Reeves shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Beside him, a major from Fort Pendleton, whom Sofia recognized from the files, Major Diaz, maintained a perfectly neutral expression that seemed almost too studied. After the briefing, Sofia implemented the first phase of her investigation plan. Rather than trying to monitor all 27 suspects simultaneously, she would create situations that might trigger revealing responses. The key was to apply pressure without revealing the true nature of her investigation. She began by announcing a random security audit of communications protocols, focusing on areas where Captain Reeves and 3 other suspects had primary responsibilities. Next, she requested unexpected access reviews for classified exercise components, targeting sections where Major Diaz and his potential associates operated. By mid-afternoon, these measures had produced their first results. 2 of the flagged personnel had requested unusual schedule adjustments following the announcement of the security audits. Another had been observed making an unauthorized call from a personal device in a restricted area. Most significantly, Captain Reeves and Major Diaz had been seen in conversation during a break. A seemingly innocent interaction, except that their personnel files showed no previous connection, and their current exercise roles gave them no obvious reason to coordinate. Sofia documented these observations in an encrypted report to Director Lin. The response came swiftly, patterns emerging. Continue pressure. Additional surveillance authorized for primary suspects. That evening, as participants dispersed for dinner in the base mess hall, Sofia deliberately positioned herself at a table with a clear view of both Reeves and Diaz. She was joined by several junior officers who were eager to hear about her rapid promotion and the espionage case she had helped solve. Sofia shared an appropriately sanitized version of events, speaking just loudly enough to be overheard by nearby tables. She emphasized certain details, the sophisticated methods used to track digital access, the pattern recognition techniques that had identified suspicious behavior while watching for reactions among her targets. Major Diaz maintained his composure, showing no visible response to her narrative. Captain Reeves, however, checked his phone multiple times with increasing agitation, eventually excusing himself from his table. Sofia waited 3 minutes, then followed, maintaining a careful distance. Instead of heading to the barracks or back to the exercise areas, Reeves made his way to a secluded spot near the base perimeter where cell reception was known to be strongest. Using the surveillance techniques that had made her so effective in the Lotus Division, Sofia positioned herself within earshot without revealing her presence. Reeves was on his phone, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. "Not sustainable anymore," she caught him saying. "They're implementing new security measures. Yes, I understand the value of the exercise data, but the risk profile has changed. No, I don't think she suspects me specifically, but her methods match what took down the Horizon Group." Sofia recorded the conversation using a specialized device concealed in what appeared to be a standard military watch. This wasn't conclusive proof, but it strongly suggested Reeves was connected to the same network that had recruited Winters and his accomplices. When Reeves finished his call and headed back toward the main facility, Sofia took a different route, arriving at the mess hall shortly before him. To anyone observing, it would appear she had simply stepped out briefly, perhaps to use the restroom or make a call of her own. The next morning, as the exercise moved into its second phase, Sofia implemented additional pressure tactics. She announced surprise verification procedures for all communications equipment, a measure that would potentially expose any unauthorized devices or modifications. The results were immediate and revealing. 2 suspects requested sudden medical leave. Another made an obvious attempt to access and clear logs from a shared terminal. And Captain Reeves was observed passing something to a sergeant from Fort Westlake, a transfer that lasted mere seconds, but was captured by the enhanced Surveillance Sofia had requested. By midday, Sofia had enough evidence to justify targeted action against Reeves and 3 others. She coordinated with Colonel Harrison and a specialized counterintelligence team that had been standing by since the exercise began. The apprehensions were conducted quietly and separately, with each suspect removed from the exercise under different pretexts to avoid alerting others. Captain Reeves was called to a special briefing that turned out to be a detailed interrogation. The sergeant he had contacted was assigned to an emergency equipment inspection that became a thorough search of his belongings and devices. By evening, 2 had confessed, providing information that implicated 7 more personnel across 3 different bases. The network was larger and more sophisticated than initially believed, with a hierarchical structure suggesting professional intelligence training behind its organization. Sofia's work had exposed only a portion of this network, but it was enough to map its outline and methodology. More importantly, the evidence gathered during the joint exercise provided critical insights into how the operation had remained undetected for so long. As she prepared her final report in her office late that night, Colonel Harrison stopped by, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "The General sends his highest commendation," he said, placing 1 cup on her desk. "Your work these past few days has potentially saved countless lives and operations." Sofia accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "We've only found part of the network. There are still unanswered questions about who's ultimately behind this." "True," the colonel acknowledged, "but you've given us the tools to find those answers. The methodology you've developed for identifying compromised personnel is being implemented across all bases effective immediately." Sofia sipped her coffee. "Considering the broader implications, they'll adapt, change their approach, develop new techniques. And we'll be ready," Harrison replied confidently. "Because of you," Sofia gestured to the lotus tattoo on her forearm. "Not just me. Everything I know, everything I can do, it comes from my training, my unit." The colonel studied her thoughtfully. "You know, when I first saw that tattoo and recognized its significance, I expected someone different. Most Lotus operatives I've encountered have been harder, more detached." "Every lotus grows differently, depending on the waters," Sofia replied. "My experiences shaped my methods, just as yours shaped you." "Speaking of which," Harrison said, changing the subject, "Director Lin informed me of your next assignment. Quite a step up from what you've been doing here." Sofia nodded. The Lotus Division never allowed its operatives to remain in one role too long. Attachment to a cover identity could compromise effectiveness, create vulnerabilities. "Before you go," the colonel continued, "there's something I've been curious about. The tattoo, I understand its official significance, the codes and clearance levels embedded in the design. But you once mentioned it had personal meaning to you as well." Sofia rarely shared personal perspectives, especially about her work. The Lotus Division emphasized objective analysis, emotional discipline. Yet something about this mission, about the role she had played and the people she had worked with, made her reconsider this boundary. "The lotus grows in mud, yet remains clean," she said after a moment. "It lives in 2 worlds simultaneously, roots in darkness, flower in light." She traced the outline of the tattoo with her fingertip. "Before I joined the division, I saw the world in absolutes. Good and evil, right and wrong, us and them." The colonel listened intently as she continued. "My training, my missions, they taught me that reality exists in the spaces between such distinctions, like Major Winters and his group. They didn't see themselves as traitors. They created a narrative where they were simply redistributing information, not betraying their country, a convenient fiction to justify greed," Harrison observed. "Yes," Sofia agreed, "but understanding that fiction, how they justified their actions to themselves, was key to identifying and stopping them." She looked down at her tattoo again. "The lotus reminds me to see beyond surface appearances." to understand the murky waters without becoming part of them. Colonel Harrison nodded thoughtfully. That's a philosophy more of us in military intelligence could benefit from. We're often so focused on the threat that we forget to understand it. Sofia finished her coffee and gathered her materials. Her report was complete, her role in this operation concluded. Tomorrow she would receive new orders, a new identity, a new mission. The cycle would continue. Will you keep the commission? Harrison asked as she prepared to leave. Second Lieutenant Chen has developed quite a reputation in a short time. Sofia smiled slightly. The rank was never mine, just a tool for a specific purpose. Like the lotus, I adapt to the waters I find myself in. The colonel extended his hand. It's been an honor working with you, whatever rank or name you carry. Sofia shook his hand firmly. The honor has been mine, sir. Few understand the true nature of what we do. You saw beyond the tattoo to the purpose it represents. As she walked back to her temporary quarters under the stars of a clear night sky, Sofia reflected on the mission's impact, not just on national security, but on the people around her. The soldiers at Fort Horizon now approached their duties with renewed vigilance and purpose. The officers who had witnessed her work carried those lessons to their own commands. Her tattoo, once mocked and misunderstood, had become a symbol that inspired others, though not for the reasons they believed. They saw it as representing heroism and exceptional service. Only Sofia knew its deeper significance, that true strength comes not from standing apart from the darkness, but from understanding it intimately while choosing to remain uncorrupted. Tomorrow she would become someone new, somewhere new. But the lotus would remain, a constant reminder of who she really was beneath every cover identity and mission parameter. Not just an operative executing assignments, but a person making choices about how to use her exceptional abilities. In the mud, yet clean. In darkness, yet blooming. In a world of shifting loyalties and moral compromises, maintaining a clear purpose and unwavering principles. That was the true meaning of the lotus. And no matter what role she played next, that meaning would continue to guide her path. 6 months later, Sofia Chen sat in a nondescript cafe in downtown Seattle, sipping green tea while reviewing briefing materials on her tablet. To casual observers, she appeared to be just another young professional catching up on work during her lunch break, perhaps an analyst for one of the tech companies that dominated the city's economy. Her hair was different now, styled in a fashionable bob with subtle highlights, and she wore civilian business attire rather than a military uniform. The lotus tattoo remained visible on her forearm, no longer hidden but transformed into a conversation piece, part of her new identity as Maya Wang, security consultant for Nexus Technologies. The tablet displayed personnel files for Nexus executives and security staff, all legitimate, employees of a real company that served as a front for certain Lotus Division operations. Sofia's cover was exceptionally thorough, complete with an apartment, colleagues who believed she had transferred from the company's Austin office, and a digital footprint that would withstand all but the most thorough investigation. Her mission here was more complex than the Fort Horizon operation. Following the intelligence gathered from Captain Reeves and his associates, the Lotus Division had traced the espionage network to what appeared to be a sophisticated foreign operation using private technology companies as covers. Nexus Technologies had secured a contract to upgrade security systems for several military installations, including Fort Horizon and the other bases where compromised personnel had been identified. This contract provided perfect cover for Sofia to investigate potential corporate espionage from within the contractor's organization. "Mind if I join you?" asked a voice, interrupting her review. Sofia looked up to see Director Lin, also in civilian clothes, carrying a cup of coffee. Unlike their previous interactions, Lin was now posing as Catherine Park, Senior VP of Security Solutions at Nexus and Sofia's direct supervisor. "Please do," Sofia replied, closing her tablet as Lin took the seat across from her. How are you settling in? Lin asked, maintaining their cover identities while speaking in the coded language they had established for public conversations. The technical systems here are impressive, Sofia answered, which meant the security at Nexus was tight, but she had found potential vulnerabilities. The team is collaborative but compartmentalized, she continued, indicating that while people worked together effectively, information was highly siloed, consistent with both good security practices and potential efforts to hide illicit activities. Lin nodded, understanding the subtext. The Rainier project timeline has been accelerated, she said, referring to the investigation's urgency. We need preliminary assessments by next week. I've identified key integration points that need further analysis, Sofia replied, meaning she had narrowed down the list of suspects who might be connected to the espionage network. Their conversation continued in this manner, seemingly innocent work discussion that conveyed operational information. To anyone overhearing, they were simply colleagues discussing project deadlines and technical challenges. As they finished their drinks, Lin casually mentioned, "There's a company dinner tomorrow night at Cascade View Restaurant. The executive team and project leads will be there. Good opportunity to make connections." Sofia understood the real message, a critical gathering where she could observe key suspects interacting in a social setting, potentially revealing relationships and hierarchies not visible in the workplace. "I'll be there," she confirmed. "Any dress code I should be aware of?" "Business formal," Lin replied. "And Maya, that lotus tattoo, it's quite distinctive. Some of our more traditional executives might find it unprofessional." This was a warning. Someone at the dinner might recognize the significance of the tattoo if they had connections to intelligence communities. "I'll make sure it's covered," Sofia assured her. First impressions matter. The next evening, Sofia arrived at Cascade View Restaurant in a tailored charcoal suit with a silk blouse that covered her forearms completely. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, offering panoramic views of the city, Puget Sound, and the distant mountains. The setting projected exactly the image Nexus wanted to convey: success, vision, and exclusivity. Sofia moved through the gathering with practiced ease, introducing herself to executives and project managers, while maintaining her cover as a competent but unremarkable security specialist. All the while, she observed the interactions around her, noting who spoke to whom, which conversations stopped when others approached, which executives seemed deferential to people who ranked below them on the organizational chart. Of particular interest was Daniel Wright, Chief Technology Officer, who had joined Nexus just 3 months before the company secured its military contracts. His background showed impressive credentials with previous defense contractors, but Sofia had identified several inconsistencies in his employment history, gaps that aligned suspiciously with known intelligence operations by hostile foreign actors. Wright was holding court near the windows, surrounded by several project managers and a woman Sofia recognized as Elise Chambers, VP of Government Relations. What caught Sofia's attention wasn't their conversation, but what happened in the background. A subtle exchange between Wright's personal assistant and the head of network security. A small drive passed between them, barely noticeable to anyone not trained to look for such transactions. Sofia made her way closer, timing her movement to coincide with the server offering champagne. As she reached for a glass, she positioned herself to overhear Wright's conversation. "The Fort Bragg implementation needs to be accelerated," he was saying to Chambers. "Our contract stipulates completion by quarter end, but I want our team on the ground next week." "That's pushing the timeline significantly," Chambers replied with a frown. "The military approval process doesn't work that quickly." Wright smiled confidently. "I've already spoken with General Harrington. He's expediting the clearances." This caught Sofia's attention immediately. General Harrington had been mentioned. In the files recovered from Captain Reeves, not as a confirmed conspirator, but as someone with authority over access to multiple military installations. If Wright had influence over Harrington, it suggested connections at levels higher than previously suspected. Sofia continued circulating through the gathering fragments of conversation and observing relationships. By the time dinner was served, she had identified 3 executives whose behavior suggested involvement in potentially illicit activities, with Wright at the center. She was seated at a table with mid-level managers, strategically positioned to observe Wright's table without being close enough to draw attention. Throughout the meal, she maintained her cover, discussing security implementations and project timelines, while mentally recording every significant interaction at Wright's table. After dinner, as guests mingled over dessert and coffee, Sofia noticed Wright step away to take a phone call in a quieter area near the restaurant's private dining rooms. Following proper surveillance protocol, she waited until he was engaged in conversation, then positioned herself at the bar, which offered a reflected view of Wright in the decorative mirror behind the bottles. What she saw confirmed her suspicions. Wright wasn't simply talking on the phone. He was photographing documents he had pulled from his inner jacket pocket. The actions were subtle, disguised as someone checking emails while on a call, but to Sofia's trained eye, the pattern was unmistakable. When Wright returned to the main gathering, Sofia maintained her distance, continuing her role as the unmemorable new hire from Austin. She left the event at an appropriate time, not too early to seem disinterested, not too late to appear overeager, and headed directly to her apartment. Once inside, she activated the Lotus Division's secure communication protocols disguised as a meditation app on her personal tablet. Her report was concise but comprehensive. Wright's suspicious behavior, the document photography, the connection to General Harrington, and the handoff between his assistant and the network security chief. Director Lin's response came within an hour. Surveillance authorized on all 3 primary suspects. Technical penetration of Wright's systems approved. Proceed with caution. Preliminary analysis suggests sophisticated counterintelligence. Awareness. The warning was significant. If Wright had counterintelligence training, he would be alert to standard surveillance techniques and security probes. Sofia would need to be exceptionally careful in her approach. Over the next 2 weeks, Sofia established herself as a diligent but unremarkable employee at Nexus. She completed her assigned security assessments efficiently, made appropriate professional connections, and participated in team activities with just enough enthusiasm to seem engaged without standing out. All the while, she was building her investigation. Using her legitimate access to Nexus systems, she identified unusual patterns in network traffic, irregular access to classified project files, and communications that bypass standard security protocols. The evidence pointed increasingly toward Wright and a small circle of associates who had all joined Nexus within the past 18 months. They appeared to be using the military contracts as cover to gain access to secure facilities and systems. What remained unclear was their ultimate objective and who they were working for. Sofia's breakthrough came during preparation for the Fort Bragg implementation, the project Wright had been so eager to accelerate. As part of the security team, she was given access to the deployment specifications, including network diagrams and access protocols for military systems that would interface with Nexus technology. Reviewing these materials in her office late one evening, Sofia noticed something that others had missed. The implementation plan included a seemingly innocuous software bridge between classified and unclassified networks, ostensibly for maintenance purposes. However, the bridge contained a subtle vulnerability that would allow for data extraction under specific conditions. This wasn't simply a flaw, it was deliberately engineered to appear as an oversight, while actually creating a backdoor into military systems. The design was sophisticated enough that it would likely pass standard security reviews, yet would provide ongoing access once implemented. Sofia documented her findings in detail, encoding them within routine security assessment reports that she submitted through official channels, while simultaneously alerting Director Lin through their secure communication protocol. The response was immediate. Maintain position. Collection team en route. Critical to identify all network participants before action, Sofia understood the directive. Despite discovering the technical compromise, they needed to identify everyone involved in the operation before moving to shut it down. Acting too quickly would alert the principals while potentially allowing others to escape detection. The next morning, Sofia was called into a meeting with Wright and the deployment team. Entering the conference room, she immediately sensed something had changed. Wright's usual confident demeanor was tinged with suspicion as he nodded to her, saying he was glad she could join them, using her cover name. They were just discussing some concerns about the security assessment she submitted yesterday. Sofia maintained her composed, professional demeanor despite the internal alarm bells, saying she was happy to clarify anything that wasn't clear in her report. Wright slid a tablet across the table. On it was her security assessment with the sections highlighting the backdoor vulnerability highlighted. He noted that her analysis suggested there was a significant vulnerability in the bridge component, which was a serious claim that could delay the entire project. Sofia replied calmly that the data supported her conclusion, and she could walk him through the technical details if he'd like. Wright said that wouldn't be necessary, his voice cooling. What he found interesting was that she was the only one who identified this supposed vulnerability, despite multiple reviews by their senior security team. The implication was clear. He suspected her motives for flagging the back door. Sofia had to navigate carefully, maintaining her cover while not backing down from her legitimate security concern. She offered that fresh eyes sometimes spot what others miss, especially when reviewing complex system interactions rather than individual components. Wright suggested that perhaps her previous experience had given her a particular perspective on security vulnerabilities. Her file mentioned government consulting work before joining Nexus. The conversation had shifted into dangerous territory. Wright was probing her background, looking for inconsistencies in her cover story. Sofia recognized the technique. It was standard counterintelligence procedure for testing a suspected operative. She replied, sticking to her cover story, that her experience had been primarily in the private sector, though she had worked with government compliance requirements for several previous employers. Wright studied her for a long moment, before abruptly changing course, saying they should table this discussion for now. He would like their senior security architect to review her findings before they made any decisions about the deployment timeline. The meeting concluded shortly after, but Sofia knew the damage was done. Wright suspected something, though he couldn't be certain what. Her cover wasn't blown, but it was compromised. She messaged Director Lin immediately after leaving the conference room, stating that the subject was showing counterintelligence awareness. Her cover was potentially compromised, and requesting extraction timeline. Lin's response was not what she expected, instructing her to maintain position as the critical phase was activated. General Harrington was arriving at Nexus tomorrow for demonstration, and the collection team was in place. Sofia understood the strategic calculus. Despite the risk to her cover, the opportunity to observe Wright interacting with General Harrington was too valuable to abandon. It could provide the final evidence needed to understand the full scope of the operation. That night, Sofia took additional security precautions at her apartment, preparing contingency plans for emergency extraction if necessary. She reviewed everything she knew about Wright Harrington and the network they appeared to be part of, looking for patterns or connections she might have missed. The next morning, Nexus headquarters was abuzz with activity in preparation for General Harrington's visit. Sofia arrived early, observing the security preparations and noting which areas were being given special attention and which were conspicuously overlooked. The general arrived with minimal fanfare, just 2 aides and a security detail that remained. In the lobby, he was immediately escorted to the executive floor, where Wright and the senior leadership waited to greet him. Sofia's role in the demonstration was minor. She would present the security protocols for the deployment during a technical briefing scheduled for mid-morning. This legitimate assignment gave her access to the proceedings without raising suspicion. As she prepared in a small conference room adjacent to the main presentation area, Sofia noticed unusual activity on the building's network. Using a specialized tool disguised as a system diagnostic application, she identified an unauthorized data transfer occurring on a segregated server, one that shouldn't have been accessible from the presentation environment. Someone was extracting data during the confusion of the demonstration preparations. The sophistication suggested Wright's team, but the timing was concerning. Were they accelerating their timeline because they suspected security had been compromised? Sofia had to make a quick decision. Alerting Director Lin might interrupt the surveillance operation already in progress. Taking direct action could blow her cover completely. Doing nothing could allow sensitive military information to be compromised. She chose a middle path, initiating a system diagnostic protocol that would temporarily slow the network while appearing to be routine maintenance. This would buy time for the collection team to identify the unauthorized access without alerting the perpetrators that they had been detected. At precisely 10 a.m., Sofia entered the main conference room for the technical briefing. General Harrington sat at the center of the table, flanked by Wright and Chambers. Other executives and technical staff filled the remaining seats, while presentation materials displayed on large screens at the front of the room. Sofia delivered her portion of the briefing with practiced professionalism, explaining the security measures implemented for the military deployment, while carefully avoiding any mention of the vulnerability she had identified. Throughout her presentation, she observed the subtle interactions between Wright and Harrington, the knowing glances, the minimal note-taking, the appearance of reviewing materials that neither actually read. These were the behaviors of people who had already discussed the real agenda privately. The public demonstration was theater, not substance. As Sofia concluded her section and returned to her seat, Wright's assistant entered the room and whispered something in his ear. Wright's expression changed almost imperceptibly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight tension in his shoulders. Something had gone wrong with their plan. Moments later, Sofia's phone vibrated with a message that appeared to be from IT services, but used the emergency extraction code stating system compromise detected and to initiate protocol sunset. The instruction was clear, her cover was blown, and she needed to exit immediately. The collection team must have obtained the evidence they needed or determined that her position was no longer tenable. Sofia gathered her materials calmly, nodded respectfully to the executives, and exited the conference room as if responding to a routine work matter. Once in the hallway, she headed not toward her office, but to the designated extraction point, the building's service elevator. She had nearly reached it when Wright's voice called from behind her, asking for a moment, please. Sofia turned, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the adrenaline now coursing through her system. She apologized for leaving the briefing, explaining that IT alerted her to a potential security issue that needed immediate attention. Wright approached slowly, his expression unreadable, noting it was interesting as he had just received a similar alert about unusual access patterns. Traced to her workstation. They stood facing each other in the empty hallway, the pretense between them growing thinner by the second. Sofia knew she needed to reach the extraction point, but Wright was deliberately blocking her path. She replied that she was investigating that very issue, that someone appeared to be using spoofed credentials to access restricted systems. Wright suggested it was someone like her perhaps, or should he say, someone like Specialist Chen. Use of her real name and former rank confirmed what Sofia had suspected. Wright hadn't just identified her as an intelligence operative. He knew exactly who she was and where she had served previously. The compromise was complete. Before Sofia could respond, the building's fire alarm activated and sprinklers began dousing the hallway. Standard Lotus Division extraction protocol: create confusion to cover operative withdrawal. In the momentary distraction, Sofia moved. With the lightning reflexes that had made her valuable to the division, sidestepping Wright and continuing toward the service elevator. He recovered quickly, reaching for her arm as employees began emerging from offices and conference rooms in response to the alarm. Sofia deflected his grasp with a subtle movement that appeared to onlookers like two people accidentally colliding in the confusion. Wright's hand closed on empty air as Sofia merged with the crowd heading toward emergency exits. Instead of following the evacuation flow, Sofia slipped into a utility corridor that led to the building's service areas. The extraction team would be waiting at the loading dock, disguised as emergency responders. She had nearly reached the service elevator when Wright appeared at the far end of the corridor with two security guards. They had anticipated her extraction route. Wright called over the blaring alarms for her to stop right there. That security breach protocols required all employees to remain together during evacuation. Sofia assessed her options rapidly. The direct route was blocked. Alternative exits would take too long to reach. The Lotus adapts to the waters it finds itself in. She reached into her jacket pocket and removed what appeared to be a standard ID badge. When activated, it would emit an electromagnetic pulse designed to temporarily disable electronic systems in the immediate vicinity, including the electronic locks on the doors around her. "Mr. Wright," she replied, her voice carrying clearly despite the alarms. "I think we both know this isn't about evacuation protocols." "No," he agreed, gesturing for the guards to move forward. "It's about national security, though we seem to disagree about what that means." "That's where you're wrong," Sofia said, her finger finding the concealed activation switch on her badge. "I know exactly what it means." She triggered the device, plunging the corridor into darkness as emergency. Systems temporarily failed. In the confusion, Sofia moved with practiced precision, slipping through a now unlocked maintenance door that led to an alternative route to the extraction point. Behind her, she could hear Wright shouting instructions to his security team, but she was already gone, moving through the building's service areas with the confidence of someone who had memorized every detail of the structure's layout. 4 minutes later, Sofia emerged from a service entrance to find an unmarked van waiting exactly where it was supposed to be. The side door slid open to reveal Director Lin and 2 extraction specialists. "Status?" Lin asked as the van pulled away from the building. "Cover compromised completely," Sofia reported. "Wright identified me by name and former rank. He was expecting the extraction attempt." Lin nodded grimly. "We suspected as much when our surveillance detected communications between Wright's team and an external security contractor specializing in counterintelligence." "What about the evidence? The network vulnerability?" "Secured," Lin confirmed. "While Wright was focused on you, our technical team completed the documentation of the backdoor mechanism and traced it to its source. We have everything we need to shut down the entire operation." Sofia processed this information. "Wright sacrificed their technical advantage to expose me. Why take that risk?" "Because you weren't the only operative they were concerned about," Lin explained, handing Sofia a tablet. General Harrington wasn't there for a demonstration. He was there to identify potential threats within Nexus. The tablet displayed surveillance photos of Harrington meeting with known foreign intelligence operatives. The general wasn't a victim of Wright's operation. He was a key facilitator. "The network is bigger than we thought," Lin continued. "Military, corporate, and government elements working together to compromise national security systems. Your discovery of the back door forced them to accelerate their timeline, which exposed vulnerabilities in their operational security. "What happens now?" Sofia asked. Lin's expression was resolute. "Now we take down the entire network. Your work has given us the leverage we need to move against all the principal figures simultaneously." As the van merged into Seattle's midday traffic, Sofia glanced back at the Nexus building receding in the distance. Her mission there was over, but the larger operation was just beginning. The evidence she had gathered would dismantle not just Wright's immediate team, but an entire espionage network that had infiltrated multiple levels of military and corporate security. She thought about Wright's question about what national security truly meant. To him, it had become a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. To Sofia, it remained a sacred trust, protecting not just information systems, but the people whose lives depended on them. Her hand moved unconsciously to her lotus tattoo, the symbol that had once been mocked, then respected, and finally had helped expose her cover. Yet even in that exposure, it had fulfilled its purpose. Like the lotus itself, Sofia had adapted to changing circumstances, turning vulnerability into opportunity. "Your extraction was textbook," Lin noted approvingly. "Despite the compromise, you maintained operational discipline." Sofia nodded, accepting the professional compliment. "The lotus adapts to whatever waters it finds itself in," she said quietly. "Clear purpose, regardless of surroundings." As the van continued toward their secure facility, Sofia reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the mocked recruit with a strange tattoo to the operative whose work would dismantle a major threat to national security. At each step, what others had seen as unusual or suspicious about her had actually been her greatest strength. The lesson wasn't just for operatives like her, but for anyone who felt misunderstood or underestimated. True strength often lies in the very qualities others question or mock, if you have the courage to embrace them fully and the wisdom to use them purposefully. The lotus doesn't fight the mud. It transforms it into nourishment for its bloom. Sofia had done the same with every challenge, every misconception, every moment of doubt directed her way. And in that transformation lay not just success, but meaning, the deep satisfaction of serving a purpose greater than oneself, while remaining true to one's core principles. That was the true significance of the lotus tattoo. Not just a symbol of operational status or specialized training, but a daily reminder that beauty and purpose can emerge from the most challenging environments if you remain rooted in your values while reaching toward the light. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.